All right, welcome back everyone. Decided to change my hat because when I'm trying to edit these videos, they all look exactly the same. So today's chapter is build trust and allow authority to spread. When you're working in an office building or in a school building, it's really easy to go to the same people all the time because they're just nearby. So you end up building these work preferences where you go to the same people all the time. And now you have the time to build your teams completely differently in a remote work environment. In many ways, in a virtual work environment, there is a flattening of hierarchy because when you see all those screenshots of people with all the little faces on their Zoom meetings, there's very little hierarchy in that everyone's kind of equal in rows. There's some liberties that people are allowed because there's no seating arrangements, there's no head of the table, there's no expected dress code. Also, if someone's taking over the conversation, it's just easy to disengage and it gets pretty obvious in a virtual environment. Additionally, in a in-person environment, it's easy to build a team with all of the stakeholders and projecting stakeholders that are needed over the course of a year and having all of those folks meet together in a meeting. And this happens all the time. In a virtual environment, that just doesn't work. You actually can't be super functional in a virtual environment with 30, 40 people in a meeting. And so that just becomes a webinar. It just becomes a one-way communication. Additionally, in a virtual environment, you don't have those like casual encounters walking down the hall or passing someone's desk or seeing them in the lunchroom. And so there's a challenge in making those connections happen in a virtual environment that are really important to the fabric of the culture of your organization. So in a remote work environment, there's an increased amount of intentionality that's required when you're scheduling meetings or reaching out to folks. When scheduling meetings in a virtual environment, it's really essential to spend some time thinking about how long you need and how much time you actually need from these people, because it's really hard to be engaged in a virtual environment for a very long time. The other thing I want to emphasize is just punctuality, because what happens in a virtual environment, whether it's in video or through a conference call, I always find that 5 minutes, waiting for somebody for 5 minutes seems like a very long time, and I end up dropping off of a call or a video conference after 5 minutes if I don't see the person. And the reason I do that, I don't know. I mean, I think that in a face-to-face meeting, 5 minutes seems totally acceptable for somebody to come in 5 minutes late and you're just waiting there and it's cool. But for some reason in a virtual meeting or in a conference call, 5 minutes seems like a very long time. And so after a couple minutes, I'm texting them going, are you coming? Or checking the calendar to make sure that I'm in the right meeting. There's just more anxiety in a virtual meeting because you're just kind of sitting there in an abyss. And so often I find it so much more respectful when I'm able to be punctual to my virtual meetings or conference calls. So you might ask, how do you build trust? And how do you build relationships in a remote work environment? And really, there are several ways you could make deposits into a relationship. And here are some tactics that I believe work really well. The first is utilize social media as a way to build engagement with your teams. Recognize people for posting on social media and then actually not only just like what they posted, but reply to what they posted with something meaningful. The reply is actually a meaningful deposit in a relationship that you're building with somebody, because people actually value the engagement in social media because it's part of our natural habit now. I also like to reserve time on my calendar so that there's opportunity for people to schedule one-on-ones, or I actually make time to deliberately reach out to folks via text or Slack just to check in on them. But the idea in doing that with these short messages is just to recognize that you know that they're there and they're valued. Finally, I like to bring a little bit of casualness to the emails and messages that I send to folks in a remote work environment, because I think that it's easy to get really formal in an email. Sometimes that just seems so distant, and I think that just having a little bit of casualness and a draft quality to it allows for people to feel like they're part of the process, and it just seems it's like a casual conversation as opposed to a formal speech. And that's what I'm trying to get to in the longer form communications that I might have with folks. Finally, you have to completely change the way you think about productivity in a remote work environment. It's not a 9 to 5 gig. We've been so indoctrinated and trained around seat time and hours worked. We really need to shift our focus towards deliverables and productivity. Similar to school systems where we are still tracking seat times as a measure of learning, that's not actually relevant in a virtual environment. Actually, in a virtual environment, seat time matters less, completion matters more, and you have the benefit of working in a remote environment is you have more flexibility. But in order to maintain that trust, but also to provide that trust to the folks that you work with, it's essential that you actually communicate and deliver things on time. Right now, with shelter-in-place scenarios and school closures, people are experiencing all sorts of distractions in their 9 to 5 day. And so with kids in the house, dogs barking, delivery people coming in, too many people in the house, other people working right next to you, all of this makes kind of the 9 to 5 hours sometimes very hard. And so allowing some of that power to the people working remotely and allowing them to adjust their schedule is really important. And ultimately, this is the merging of our work and life, and we're all experiencing it at the same time, where we've completely merged our day-to-day lives and have been very accepting of it because that's the condition we're in with our work. So this is the normal now, where our work and our lives are completely integrated, and we're all experiencing it and going through this experience together, and all like kind of it's baptism by fire. We're just forced to get comfortable with it now. So there you go. Build trust and allow authority to spread. This is Anthony Kim. Don't compare your insights with other people's outsides. Peace.